good afternoon, good evening, welcome, hello, thank you for joining me. This is Books and Beer, and I am going live on my own, solo today, to answer your questions. I put on my mailing list yesterday, ask me some questions about my writing life, about my travels, about those sorts of things. Got loads of great responses, and I'm going to go through them in today's conversation with you. If you're watching live, feel free to jump a hello in the comments, and if you're watching live now and you could tell me that it sounds all right and it looks all right from where you are, that would be amazing too, because the fear is when I'm doing these on my own is that I'm talking with like the sound off or something like this, and it doesn't make sense to anyone. And I get an hour in and someone says, oh, by the way, you've not turned the microphone on, or whatever. So if it's sounding good, give me a thumbs up in the comments. That will be really, really helpful. Thank you if you were one of the really kind people that sent in a couple of questions. And as I say, if you want to do them in the comments of YouTube or on Facebook, that's amazing. Brilliant. Ray says the sound is good. That is all that I wanted to hear. First of all, I need to pour this beer. I've gone for another Guinness, you know. It's the same crate. I bought a crate of about 20 of them. And economies of scale and all that. And yeah, here we go. So I'm gonna pour that. And because it's a Guinness, I've got it in a bigger glass rather than the little one that I normally have my ales in. Whoa. Fiery one. Gosh. That was probably a shock. Woke you up a little bit. So anyway, I hope you're keeping well. For me, it's been quite a good week. I've been plodding through the edits of Istanbul, which will be the next book, book 6 in Leo and Alyssa's story. I am pretty close to being finished, actually. Yeah, I'm quite excited about it. This is sort of the first draft is done, and now this is like the first edit. So there's a couple of scenes where I need to add things in. Cheers. What are you drinking as well? Let me know. Put that in the comments too. There's a couple of scenes that I need to sort of finish or beef up a little bit that I don't feel like I've done them justice. So that's what I do as I go through and do this first draft. I sort of add to those as I'm working on it. So yeah, it's going well. It's going well. I'm probably about halfway through that first draft, that first read through. Did that this morning. I'll be continuing with that again tomorrow. Now, I was supposed to be joined by David Wood today, who's a great thriller author. He's got many, many, many books to his name, and I'm reading one of them at the moment. But he wasn't able to make it. We're going to reschedule it for another time. I mean, that is the issue with doing these live, isn't it? If it were like a podcast where I record the thing and then put it out however long afterwards, it wouldn't make a difference. But because they're live, you have to be here at a certain time, and that's the way it is. That's fine. That's sort of the nature of it. I don't mind jumping in every so often and doing a solo rant to you all. So there we are. Cheers. Ray says he's having coffee in his trusty Yeti mug. Nice. That's lovely. Do like a Guinness. I did have a beer last night as well. Just the one actually. 2, in fact. They're only little ones, though. That doesn't count. Welcome if you just joined us, by the way. I can see more people tuning in all the time. This is Books and Beer. I'm Luke. I'm talking about my books, my stories today. It's just going to be me. By the way, I'm trying, and I will get into the questions at some point. I realise I've been talking for 4 minutes nearly and haven't done that. I will get into them. I'm trying to build up my YouTube sort of subscriber following. That is something I think could be really good to build up. There's a lot of content on there now. You know, all of these interviews go on there with all the great authors that I've had. All of the great conversations go on there automatically. So there's a lot of stuff on there, and I think it could be useful to people, whether you're a reader and you're interested in these authors and you want to see a little bit behind the scenes, or whether you're a writer as like myself and want to sort of hear how they create. You know, it could be a good thing. So if you haven't yet subscribed to that channel or clicked that little icon that means that you get the notifications, or liked any of the videos, whatever, please do that. That's so helpful to me to spread these conversations as far and as wide as possible. So your questions, I've got I think 10 questions here on the screen in front of me. All sorts of things. That was great. If you can think of any whilst I'm talking, of course, jump in and do that. The first one is one that I have talked about before, but I think it's really important, and it changes all of the time actually. So maybe when I spoke about it before, it doesn't quite hold true anymore. But how do you make sure your books are faithful to the place that they're set? Now, that's so important to me. So thank you for asking the question. By the way, I've not put names on any of the questions because some people wanted them, some people wouldn't. I just thought it's easier to anonymize them all. So you'll hear you'll hear your questions, but I won't say who you are at this stage, unless you put it in the comments, in which case then I will say who you are. How do you make sure your books are faithful to the place they're set? Now, this is so important to me because travel is very important to me. So my books really are about the place as much as they're about the people and the characters and the storyline. Of course, that's important, but bringing that place to life for me is very, very important. I think, first of all, I make sure they're faithful to the place they're set by only writing about places that I've been to myself. Now, I don't necessarily spend a long time in those places. I haven't been there for weeks or months. Sometimes it's just days, sometimes it's a few days, but I've been there. And I've got a flavour of that place. You know, I've walked those streets. I've eaten in the restaurants. I've been to the bars that my characters go to. And I think that is important. That's important to me. Now, there are some writers, some very good writers who write in places they've never been. You know, that they will research it and they will do that. And that's not to detract from the skill of those people. But for me, it's important to have been to those places. Even in the books that I worked on with Stephen Moore, in the places that I hadn't been. So Sydney, I've never been to Sydney, but Steve has. He's lived there for several months. So when we were working on that together, he wrote the scenes that were sort of recognizable as Sydney. Do you know what I mean? Or he gave them that description, that flavor of the place, because he'd lived there, so he knew those sorts of things. So there were bits I was like, right, we need a scene set in a bit of a dodgy area, you know, with sort of hoodlums and gangsters in. And Steve was like, oh, I know exactly where that'll be. And he went ahead and wrote the sort of bit. And I then said, right, this needs to happen and this needs to happen. And then he went ahead and sort of put that together. So that's the way that works. Secondly, I do a lot of research. I've been for Istanbul. I've been on Istanbul's map for so many hours thinking, right, if they started here and they needed to go there, and that's that, you know what I mean? Sort of tracking the various roads. Is it a right turn off that roundabout or is it a left turn? You know, right down to these, excuse me, tiny little details that just give it that little bit of, that little bit of sort of, that they make someone who knows that feel they're connected with the story. That's really, really important to me. So a good question. And, you know, thirdly with that, it is always a worry of mine. It's always a worry of mine that I'm going to write a book like Istanbul or Berlin or whatever, and someone who's lives in that place and that place is very close to their heart, they're going to go, you've done a really bad job of it. They're going to say to me, no, that's not right. You know, and they're going to reject it because I've not done that. So it is a real concern that I get that right. Let's have a quick look in these comments whilst I have a sip of my Guinness to see who's tuning in and listening to us. If you're watching these afterwards, by the way, most people do watch them after. I know that from talking to people. They can't make it at the time. You can still leave comments. That's great. You know, still like, still subscribe, still do all those things. It's still really important to me that those things are done. Nick Sturgeon's joining us. Hello, mate. How are you doing? You're in Mexico. Wow. You live not too far from me. I know that. Alison's in. Hi, Alison. How are you? And Ray is joining me as well. Fantastic. The three of you in the comments. Thank you so much for being here. Okay. Next question then. Where do you hope to set books in the future? Good question. There's loads of different places I hope to set books. I have decided the next Leo and Alyssa book is going to be set in London, which is a funny one for me actually, and it took a lot of consideration, because I always thought that London wasn't very exotic, and I like setting books in exotic places. But what I've realised is that London isn't very exotic to me because I've been there a lot. To other people, it is because they haven't been there a lot. So if you're a listener, from America or from Africa or from Australia or from Asia, wherever, London to you would be an interesting place to set it. And also because I know it, because it's very close to me, I can write it with quite a lot of authority, because I've never lived there, but I've been there for a long, frequently for a very long time. So I think I can write that with some authority. So London will be the next Leo and Alyssa book after Istanbul. I think that's the order it will go. After that, I'm not sure. To be fair, yeah, we will see. I've got some other ideas coming, but they're not sort of firm enough to tell you about yet. What do you look for when you choose a book's setting? Yeah, another great question. What do you look for when you choose a book setting? Because there are great places I've been that I've loved going that I haven't set books in yet. For example, Bangkok in Thailand. I always thought I'd set a book there. And in fact, I talked about that with Ty Hutchinson when he was on the show a few episodes ago. We talked about the crazy side of Thailand. Do you remember? It's a great episode, actually. Really, really cool conversation. And talking about Thailand and Bangkok and all the craziness of that particular city just made me think, I need to set a book there. Because I visited probably almost 10 years ago, and it was so much fun. It's such a great city. He says, unfortunately, it's changed a bit since then. It's become a bit more corporate and a bit more serious, which is upsetting to find. But I'm sure there's other places that are just as crazy and just as fun as that. So I always thought I'd set a book there. Haven't yet. But what I look for is something that interests me. Something that sort of grabs me and makes me think, yeah, that would make a good setting. Or some kind of story behind the scenes. Do you know what I mean? So with Riga, for example, it wasn't the city itself that was interesting. Whilst it's a lovely city to visit and I really enjoyed my time there, it wasn't the city itself that was interesting. It was this story of these missing documents that I'd read about whilst I was there. So that sort of historical little element, that sort of little fact that I took and twisted and sort of turned it into my own story device, a fictional device, was my appeal for writing there. In fact, I talked about this with last week with Kevin Tomlinson. We were talking about how truth and fiction are combined in our books, and sometimes the truth is the weirder part of it. Sometimes the fiction is the easiest bit to understand, but the true bits are quite challenging. Okay, with regard to the Leo and Alyssa series, which is my main series I write on my own, what made you choose that genre instead of going down the psychological thriller or romance avenue? Very good question. I think, Alison, that was one of yours, actually. Yeah, good question. And I didn't really choose it, to be honest. And I know it was my first book, and I think a lot of writers do this. They sit down and they write without really thinking about where it's going. And I did that. I sat down and I would write. I would get up early. I remember it now. I was a teacher at the time. And I tried to write in the evenings after school and it wouldn't work. It didn't work. It just didn't happen. So I set my alarm a little bit earlier every single day. And I used to get up and I'd write for about 40 minutes before going to work, and I'd get a few hundred words down. And I never really thought about where the story was going. I just knew that I wanted to have a go at writing it. And it took loads of editing. It took loads and loads of work before it became the story it is today. But there was never really the decision that it was sort of the thriller or the mystery that it now is. And I do think in a way that is problematic with Kathmandu and some things in this series, because they don't fit exactly in the thriller genre. They're not straight up thrillers. There's an element of mystery. There's an element of action adventure, and there's the element of thriller as well. And that does that does upset some readers. Some readers don't like them because of that, because they want a straight up thriller. They want, the classic sort of thriller story. They want the classic mystery story, and it doesn't really do that. It sort of fits somewhere in between. So in a way, that's a problem. But I love it, and I'm happy with the way they are. And yeah, I know that you guys are quite keen on them as well, so I think that's fine. But in answer to your question, I didn't really choose it. It just sort of turned out that way. And I suppose if we think about it, that's because um, I had always liked those books. I'd always enjoyed those books as a child and as a reader before that. I'd always liked those sorts of those films, those stories. So I suppose it was just that sort of desire to write those sorts of things coming out. All right. So, as I say, if you've got any questions whilst we're doing this, you can pop them in the chat. There's been all the ones I'm going through today have been sent in by email. I asked my email list if they, when I learnt that David couldn't be here yesterday, I asked my email list if they had any questions for me to talk about, because I haven't done these sorts of things. I don't do solo ones very often. Last year before I did the interviews, I used to do these every week, didn't I? Just chatting. And that was fun. I liked them. But then someone suggested the interviews, and anyway, it's good to do the solo ones once in a while. But I thought I'll throw that out to you, and we'll see where we get. We'll see where we go to. You're currently working on Istanbul. What's your project after that? It will be to crack on with the next Leo and Alyssa book. I feel last year I spent a lot of time working on the joint project with Steve. So the Kayla books, which I love. They're great. 3 of them out there. And I do actually need to remind people on my newsletter about them, because I think I haven't really spoken about them for a while, because I've been working on the other series. They've sort of gone out of the top of my mind. And I think that's the same with readers as well. So I think there's a lot of people who haven't discovered them yet. So they took a big chunk of the year to sort of push over the line. And so this year is really about, for me, focusing on these Leo and Alyssa books, getting, I think, a good number of them done, a good number of them out, so that series has got some more books for you to enjoy. I think it's at 5 books at the moment. I don't think that's enough for it to, I'd like, I'm not saying complete it. I'm not saying it'll be the end of the series, but I'd like to get a few more out, so that there's a good number to sort of read through for new people that discover me at that time. So yeah, London will be the next one. And I'm not sure, I might go and do something else after that, so that then there's, what would that be, 7 Leo and Alyssa books. I might go and do something else, or I might just carry on. I might see what I decide to do thereafter. All right. What do you do? I like this question, actually. What do you do if you get stuck on something in the story? What do you do if you find something difficult and get stuck on it? Yeah, really good question. And I think that's inevitable, actually, particularly for someone like me who doesn't plan too much. Now, I have a vague idea where the story is going to go, and I've tried planning, actually. I tried putting a lot of planning in real detail, and I did a great plan. I put loads of work in. I planned it all out in great detail. And then I was writing it, and I got to about a third and was like, that wouldn't happen. That doesn't make sense. Why have I said that? And so I ended up making a change about a third in. And that, of course, threw out the rest of the plan. You can't change something at like a third and then follow, So it was almost as good as useless, the second 2/3 of that plan. So now what I've done, and I've done this with Istanbul, and I think I'll do this next time, is done a very loose plan. It's like, here's the main beats of the story, beginning, middle, end, whatever. The main sort of thing, the main thing that it's about. And then from there, I'll sort of make it up as I go along. I'll sort of see what comes out. I'll see how it works. I actually love talking to other authors about this. It's one of my favorite things to ask, because everyone does it differently. Now, I've talking to Kevin last week. He said he just starts with the title, and I know Stephen Taylor does the same as well. They just start with the title, and from that they get the place, they get the characters, they get the nemesis or the antagonist, and it just sort of merges together. It just sort of comes together somehow, and I love that idea. But I also know from doing the work with Steve Moore that actually in that one he plans it quite specifically and quite in a quite detailed way. So anyway, different people do it in different ways, and that's great. But for me, if I get stuck on something, I've gone completely off the question here, haven't I? I've just looked back at the question and I'm not even talking about it. I'm talking about something completely different. If I get stuck on something, I find having a break from it is a good idea. Sometimes that can just be an hour. Go out for a walk, go to the pub, sit there and drink a beer, just go and read a book in the garden or whatever. I find sometimes getting stuck on something is my sort of mind's way of saying, you need to stop doing this for a while. You need a break from this, and actually it takes a lot to do that because it's counterintuitive, isn't it? If you find something hard or you find something challenging, the natural impulse, like the natural compulsion, is to just go at it, like, just hammer it until you win, until it breaks, till you're through. That's the sort of natural thing. But actually, I've found in creativity, in writing, the best thing to do is to step back and go, okay, what's going on here? And just go out, walk around the fields. And then normally I've got this walk near my house, and it's about an hour and 45-minute loop. And there's a point where it goes through this farmyard and little farm track. And funnily enough, that's about the midway point. So it's about 50 minutes or 45 minutes or whatever through the thing. And generally, I walk around there and I walk down this little track, and I've figured it out by then. By the halfway point, the answer is there. And I take up my phone and I record a voice note saying, so-and-so does this, and so-and-so does this, and then leave it and then sort it out a couple of days later or whenever I get back to it. So yeah, just having a break from it for me is the best way to deal with it if I get stuck on something, rather than the conventional wisdom of just sort of battling through. If there's any other authors listening in, I know you're working on something, Nick. I know sometimes we get some other authors tuning in. If you are in that situation, what do you think? What do you do? Let me know, because I'm interested to see whether I'm the normal one here or the unusual one. Okay. Does the weather change your writing process? I love this one. I think this is one of yours as well, Alison. Does the weather change your writing process? Yes, to an extent, but only because if it's nice weather, I like to go out. If it's not raining, I mean, I don't like to call weather nice or not nice. Actually, I find I'm trying to change that because because I think we do that, don't we? Go, it's not nice outside, and actually, it's not. It's the weather isn't nice or not. The perception of the weather is ours. The weather is what the weather is. It doesn't care. It doesn't have emotions. Anyway, if it's not raining and it's warm, I tend to go outside and have a walk or go for a bike ride or something. I try to anyway. Well, whilst it's light, and the reason being is because up here in England, it gets dark quite early in the winter, and it can be grey and it can be cold, and it's more pleasant to go outside. I'm watching what I say. It's more pleasant to go outside when it's warm and bright. So if it is one of those days, I tend in the afternoon to close the laptop and get out. So I'll do a bit less when the weather's nice. But maybe I'm more productive because those ideas are turning. And Fiona says in the comments quite rightly that I think your subconscious works on it. Yes, I think you're absolutely right there, Fiona. I do think you're absolutely right. And she also said she's fascinated on how authors write. Oh, Alison's asking a question in the comments as well. I'll answer this one whilst I'm looking in it. Do you miss teaching? Would you ever go back to it? There are some things I miss, actually. There are some things I miss. I miss the team that I used to work with. I had a great team that I worked with. I wouldn't have done it for as long had I not have had. I do also miss sort of working towards something as a group. The idea of being in that sort of being in something together and getting through something together was so strong, and it was such a great thing to be part of. But I do love my lifestyle at the moment, being able to work on my creativity and work in the way that suits me. So I don't miss that side of it. Maybe I would go back to it. I would go back to it in a different way, though. I've always said if I was to go back to it, I would go back for a short time with a specific end. I wouldn't go back and just do a job for the duration. I might go back for 6 months and be like, right, I'm going to do a 6-month contract and I'm going to do this. Or I go back and do a day here and a day there and whatever. Maybe. Never say never, of course. Never say never. I might change my mind in a few years. I've only been out of it almost 2 years now. But yeah, I may go back to it. But I don't think so at this stage. We will see. Never say never, as I say. Nick says, how do you go about plotting a story? Yeah, good question. I've got like essentially like an Excel spreadsheet, which has just got the chapter numbers on the side. And I think they're more sort of scenes than chapters, because quite often when I'm writing them, chapters will get split or combined depending on how long they are. So, but I call them chapters at this stage. And essentially then it will just be like chapter 1. The setting is the Hagia Sophia in Istanbul. It's dark. It's the night time. A character is doing this, and this happens, and this happens. You know, so I know the setting. I know what's going on. I know what characters are in it. Chapter 2, Leo and Alyssa are in their flat, hanging out, drinking beers. You know, and then chapter 3. So I can look and see very easily, very quickly what happens in that scene. It might only be a dozen words to describe that scene of a couple of thousand words, but then I can see and I can move it around and I can work on it at that stage. That doesn't mean at any point that it will stay like that. These things always change in the writing process, because you just spend so long focusing on that particular scene that when you get to there in that writing process, that things do always change. And that's important. It's important, I think, to be open and be flexible at things like this. Yes, yeah, you're right. Nick sent me a plotting model at the end of last year, which was to do with a particular technique that a lot of authors use. I haven't done it that way. But maybe one day I will. I'm always sort of changing things. At the moment, this is working for me, and I think I'm going to stick with the method that sort of works at the moment. But I mean, people always change ideas, you know. I do think, though, I don't know what you guys think. It is important not to overthink things, particularly in this, because I think we all a lot of us inherently know what we want a story to be like, don't we? And I think readers know this as well. You inherently know what you want to happen in the end, or how you want it to work out, you know. And I think if you overthink that and you over agonize something, actually you're moving away from what's the instinctive sort of end to that story. Or maybe it's the same. I don't know. Maybe the instinctive end is the same as what's in the format that you've like in the conventional format. Fiona says, cheers, Guinness. My dad would be proud. Absolutely, it is. Cheers. Because your dad worked at Guinness, didn't he? I remember you saying, Fiona. Am I right at that? Have I remembered that correctly? Yeah, it's a new passion of mine. Well, I wouldn't say passion. I'm passionate about it, but I've never really used to drink Guinness. I used to prefer lighter beers. But in the last couple of months, in fact, a couple of months ago, Martha and I went to the pub near where we live, and they only had like Beavertown IPAs and those sorts of pale ales, which I don't mind, but they're not my favourite. I prefer sort of a darker beer, a Doom Bar or a Landlord or something like this, a proper blokey English ale. They didn't have any of those, and I was like, oh. So I had a Guinness instead, and it was really lovely. I was really enjoyed it. So there we are. That's why. Okay, let's have a look. Oh, I've answered that one. I've answered a lot of them. Right, I'll delete those so that I don't answer the same one twice. I know that you've touched on this in the past, but how does a collaboration between two authors work? Interesting question, actually, and I think it's always different, because I know, having talked to a lot of authors now over the last year, that they always talk about it in a different way. And I think there's lots of different ways. Yeah, as I say, lots of different ways it can work. Some ways it can work is that there'll be two perspectives through the story. So maybe, say for example, a male perspective and a female perspective, or say for example, the protagonist, so the main character, Leo or Alyssa in my stories, and the antagonist, so like the villain, on the other side, and their stories will alternate. So we'll see them both sort of going through, and it can sometimes work that one author writes one perspective and the other author writes the other perspective, and then they put them together in that sort of format. It can sometimes work that authors use sort of online word processing software, like the word system that's online, so that they can both write at the same time, so that one will go in for an hour and write a bit, and then the next one comes in an hour later and reads what they've written and write a bit at the end. I've never done that, but I'd like to try that, actually. I've suggested that to Steve a couple of years ago. I think that would be really good fun, because you've no idea what that person's going to say. So you'd go in, write 500 words, say, right, I'm done. Next person would go in, write 500 words, right, I'm done. Be like a tag team, wouldn't it? Just constantly coming in and moving it a bit further forwards. Whether it would end up as a reliable and interesting story or a successful story, I don't know. That's another question. But I think it would be a fun thing to try. So maybe one day we'll try that. The way Steve and I did it is we planned it together. I wrote most of the first draft. He added some bits in. And then he did an edit, I did an edit, and then we published it. So it was a bit of a sort of joint process in the planning stage. I did the early bit of writing, he did the later section, and then we went on and did that. I think if we do it again, we'll see how that works out, because it was, yeah. I mean, it's a difficult one. There's lots of different ways it can be done. And they've all got their sort of pros and cons, I think. So that's the way to do it. And it's, as I say, it's interesting to look at how will the other authors do it on here. In fact, it was Jim Heskett, wasn't it, talking about his books with Nick Thacker, who said, I think they worked in a similar way to Steve and I, in that they met up, planned them, and then Jim went off and wrote them, and then Nick sort of Jim wrote like a skeletal sort of draft. Nick added in sort of various different layers, and then they went from there. Okay. Oh, there's a couple of questions popping up in the comments here. I can see. Gosh, 32 minutes already. Wow, time just flies with you guys, doesn't it? Yeah. Yeah. Nick says Doom Bar is one I can drink every day. 100%, mate. That's one of my faves, actually, Doom Bar. And I like how sort of popular it's become, in that you can get it everywhere now. It's, you can get it in airports and places like this. The places where you used to just be able to get like a Heineken and you'd be like, or a Carling or something. And now they're selling Doom Bar, and that makes me happy. I like that a lot. Okay. Alison says, I don't want to give any spoilers away. If people haven't read Kathmandu, shocking. Yes, shocking. Read it now. If they haven't. But how did you come up with the idea of the restaurant? Hoo-hoo. Yes, good question. Funny, this one, because I don't want to give any spoilers away either. But in my first book, Kathmandu, there it is on the shelf behind me. That's my first one that was released 2019, so 3 years ago in May. I think it's the 19th of May will be its birthday, which is amazing to think. Yeah, so how did I come up with the idea for the restaurant? Well, I've talked about this before, but I will tell you again because I think it's a great story. It was when I was in Bangkok, actually. So this is why this has sort of come into the it has sort of been written about, but not directly. I remember going out to a nightclub with some friends, and we were in this nightclub, and we met another group of people in there, and they said, "Oh, we're going on to this other party. It's going to be amazing. You should come." And we thought, yeah, why not? And we went, and we walked out of the nightclub, down this little alleyway, down this back street, through a laundrette, into this laundrette, through the laundrette and out the back. And then in a lift, there was a lift, and they called the lift, and we all piled in, and it went up to the next floor, slowly. And we heard as this lift was climbing up this bass line, boof, 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 like against the wall. It got louder. And the doors opened, and it was this whole nightclub in there, just behind. It must have been some kind of speakeasy, not allowed to be open at that time, or whatever, unlicensed place. That's why it was so so sort of sneaky and secretive. But it was great fun. We stayed there for a couple of hours, had beers. Nothing bad happened. We didn't get, whatever happened in Kathmandu's restaurant. We didn't. But it just got me thinking. It got the cogs turning of the idea of you don't know what happens behind the frontage of the shop. Do you know what I mean? You don't know what happened. Like, it looked for the street just like a normal laundrette, big tumble dryers and piles of washing and whatever. But behind there was something completely different going on, and you never know what's going on behind those sorts of closed doors. And it got me thinking that, and those sorts of cogs kept turning. And I thought, oh, what if this happened? Behind the kitchen door, you don't know what's going on behind there. When the restaurant closes, you don't know what's going on. So yeah, that sort of story and a bit of imagination later, and that's how it sort of turned out. Yeah. Okay, what are you reading at the moment? Interesting question. Another one. Thank you for that, whoever sent that. I was actually reading one of David Wood's books. I'm about halfway through it. I think it's... The name of it eludes me, actually, but it was good. It's one of his sort of action adventure books, which I'm really enjoying. I'm about halfway through that. I do always try and do that, actually, when I have someone on the show. If I've not read their books before, I try to at least read the first 2/3 of the book before I talk to them, just so that I've got an idea. Particularly someone like David Wood, who's got so many books out. I couldn't read a number of them. I'd never be able to read all of them. Alison, you might, because you read incredibly quickly. I think you read about 2 books a day sometimes, don't you? But I couldn't. But I think just having a go and reading a bit, so I know the characters and I know the sort of style that he goes for. I think that's very important. It's certainly important to me, anyway, if someone's giving up their time to talk to me, that I give up some time and enjoy their books, and it is a great book too. So anyway, that was one of the books I'm reading. I was also reading a travel book about volunteering abroad, which was for someone I was interviewing on the podcast, actually, on the Travel Now podcast, a lady called Susan Gibson, who's a writer. So I've been reading her book too. Nick says he loves the potential for sinister places like that. Yeah, I agree. Those sorts of things just make me think, yeah, that's a great idea. How's your writing projects coming on, Nick? Because you were in the process of working on a novel, weren't you? And that was going to be set. Is it set in Nottingham or in Nottinghamshire somewhere? I remember. That's going to be great. I'm looking forward to talking to you about that. Maybe we'll have to have you on Books and Beer, to be fair. When the first one's ready to launch, we'll have you on here to promote it, for sure. Alison says, with regards to the Travel Now podcast, which I love, where is the next adventure? I've got a backlog of episodes for you, actually, with the Travel Now podcast. I did one last week, which was about travelling in 2022 and how I am going to make that happen. There is one next week with a lady called Caroline Sanday, who is a travel blogger and talks about going away for the day, because she does day trips to various places. A brilliant conversation. She does these day trips where she meets a group of people at the airport, takes them off to Rome or Budapest or Barcelona or Berlin. They don't all have to start with B, but they're just the ones I thought of. And then she brings them back in the evening, and they just go for sort of 12 hours to these particular places. A brilliant idea. Then I've got my adventures. We've got both my adventure in Budapest, which I can't believe it's taken that long to come out because I had a bit of a break over the Christmas period, and then these interviews. Anyway, that's going to be a couple of weeks after that. Then we've got Martha and I's Scottish rail adventure, which is great fun. We had the best time going on the train in Scotland. We went on the West Coast. What's it called? The West Coast High Line? No, it's not called the High Line. The West Highland Line. That's it. The West Highland Line, which goes from Glasgow to Fort William and up to Malig, which was fantastic. It was such an incredible journey. We loved it, or I loved it, and I think Martha enjoyed it too. Yeah. So yeah, that's to come. And then this interview with Susan Gibson, which I did this week. So loads of episodes on the Travel Now podcast. If you've not listened to that, thank you, Alison, for giving me the opportunity to promote it. If you've not listened to it, that's another of my projects. There's so many of them that I always feel, there's always, I always forget to mention something because I do so many lots of different little bits and bobs. But if you go on Spotify or you go on Apple Podcasts or whatever podcast app you like to use and put Travel Now podcast in there, you'll find me. I don't talk about writing so much. Although my books are mentioned, it's more about travel. So it's just about sort of destinations, travel styles, interviews with other travellers and those sorts of things. Have a listen, see if you like it. It might be for you, it might not. Brilliant either way. Thank you for looking. Yeah. So Nick says, he's talking about his book. Yes, Murders in the Trent Valley. Amazing. I started 10 days ago and I'm popping out to a different coffee shop in Mexico City each afternoon. Oh, that sounds ideal. I started writing Kathmandu in a coffee shop in Madrid, funnily enough. And I was just there visiting for a few days and just thought, you know what? It was Christmas 2018. No, it wasn't 2018 because I released it in 2019. Maybe 2017. Yes, it was 2017 into 2018. That's Christmas 2017. And I sat in this coffee shop and I thought, you know what? If I'm going to write this, I'm just going to have to bloody do it, aren't I? No one else is going to do it for me. So I went there and every day, as Nick's describing, I went to a different coffee shop and I did about 1,000 words each afternoon. And I think when I came back, I had about 4,000 or 5,000 words done, which is the first little bit. I'm not even sure those first 4,000 or 5,000 words ever made it into the final draft. You know what I mean? Although maybe they did. Not sure. But yeah, it was one of those things. It was great though. I really, really enjoyed it. It was a great start to it. And Madrid is a wonderful place to go as well, as I'm sure Mexico City is. I have not been to Mexico City. In fact, I've not been to Mexico at all. So I'd love to do that. And I think it will be on the list for the next... It won't be this year, I don't think. I've been... I will go at some stage, but there's lots of places to go and they're all calling out to me. All right. Oh, final question. And this is... I think this might be... I don't know who this is by. Final question, and then if there's no more in the comments, I will sign off. It's always lovely to have these conversations with you. We've been talking for 43 minutes, which is impressive, I think. If you had to live anywhere in the world for a year without leaving, where would it be and why? Oh, that's a hard one, isn't it? Yeah, that's difficult because there are a lot of places that I love to go and I've really enjoyed going, but I'm not sure I could spend a year there. India is one of my favourite travel destinations. I've had incredible times there. Not sure I don't think I'd want to spend a year there. I don't know though. Maybe in the south, in the more sort of rural places, I could spend, but then that's quite broad, isn't it? It's a massive country. I think perhaps if it was somewhere like India that I could travel around the country as a whole, actually, go to Darjeeling and live in a mountain for a couple of months, go to a city for a few weeks, go down and live on a beach in Goa for a bit. I could do that, actually. I think that would be great. That would be my answer. But if the person who asked this question wants to be more specific and say, no, it's got to be in one particular house, in one particular place, then I think I'd find that difficult because I like being in a city. I like being around places, but by the same token, I do like a bit of space too. It's why I like Nottingham. Of all the places I've been, I like coming back here because we've got the city and we've got just outside of it countryside and open space, and it's a good balance of the two. I think I'd find it difficult to be in a bigger city where that was a drive away or a long train journey away. So yeah, that would be my answer, to do that in India if I could move around. If not, I think it would probably still be somewhere in Asia. But I'm not sure exactly where. That's a difficult question. And Fiona said her brother did that for a year. Was that in India, Fiona, when your brother was travelling around? And excuse me, Nick says the Travel Now podcast sounds good. Thank you. I'm really pleased with it, actually. I'm really proud of it. It's become a bit of a... It was a bit of... yeah, it was one of those things I've just sort of tried and really enjoyed it. We're at 30 episodes now. We've done all sorts of different things. And it's like this, actually, doing these broadcasts, in that I don't know where it's going to go. I don't know what the game plan is. I don't really have a game plan, but I'm enjoying the process of creating something different. You know what I mean? Of talking about travels, of making an excuse to go to new places to record episodes, to have conversations with other travellers. And that, to me, is great. I really enjoy that. So that's why it's its own reward at this stage. Maybe it will get a load of listeners and it will be something great in the future, and maybe not. And that's fine. Either way. I hope it does. I see myself doing it for another year at least, and seeing how it comes out. But yeah, if you haven't heard of it before and you fancy trying out a travel podcast, search the Travel Now podcast on any podcasting app and you will find it there. Yeah, Fiona says she'd live in Thailand. Yes, Thailand could be good as well. But again, Fiona, I thought of that whilst I was answering the question. Again, I would live in Thailand if I could travel around the whole of Thailand. I think I'd find it difficult to live on a remote Thai island for a whole year. I'd want some life, you know. And by the same token, I would find the Thai cities that I've visited a bit crazy to live in for a whole year. I'd need a bit of both. I'm sure there are smaller towns in Thailand where it's less crazy and they're still beautiful. So that might be my answer. Going to one of the coastal cities or the coastal towns where they've got both of those things, perhaps. Yes. Gosh. So Nick says he's done 16,000 words. He's looking towards 80,000 words for this one. Amazing, Nick. Well, if you want to if I can help in any way, do let me know. It'll be a pleasure to help you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, this has been great fun. Thank you so much for joining me. Still got some Guinness left. It's because I'm chatting on my own, isn't it? You know. Thank you so much for joining me. I need to check up who's joining me next week, actually. Gosh, should have looked at this up before the show. So I will schedule David Wood again. Another point. I think it'll be 2 or 3 weeks' time. We'll have him back on the show. It'll be great to have that conversation with him. Next week, though, Alan Baxter is joining me for Books and Beer. So it won't just be me. We'll be on at a slightly different time, though, because he's in, I think, New Zealand or perhaps Australia. Although I haven't written down annoyingly, I haven't written down what time it is. I think it's only an hour different. I think it's an hour earlier. So I think it'll be either 4 or 3 to next Wednesday, because he's in Australia or New Zealand. So he's ahead. Is that right? Oh, I don't know. I can't remember. Or maybe it's... Anyway, ignore me for now. Look it up. I'll put the thing up in the next couple of hours, so you know. Oh, he's Australian, Ray says. Okay, that makes sense. So maybe it's 9 a.m. for him. I've just if it's 5 or 6 p.m. for us, it'll be 9 a.m. in the morning for him over there for the following day. So he'll be in the future. Thank you so much. Remember, please, if you've got this far, I massively appreciate this. If you could like and subscribe my Facebook page, and subscribe on on YouTube. You do Instagram as well if you like. On YouTube, subscribe and click that little bell thing. That's really helpful, because that means that you get all of the updates about the new videos I get. And if you know someone else who will enjoy hearing me talking about writing, hearing me talking about travel, talking to other authors, do send one of these videos their way. I think sharing things, even in this age of algorithms and all of that sort of stuff, a recommendation from a friend is so important. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your week, and I will see you for some more Books and Beer next Wednesday. Woo!